I'm going to call to order the March 18th, 2021 meeting of the Delta Protection Commission. And again, certainly thank all of our commission members, our staff, and all of our community members and those that are tuning in for joining us for this meeting. And note that we just started just a few minutes after 4 o'clock. So with that, let's go ahead and do our flag salute to initiate this, and then we'll call the roll. So if we have a new commissioner, I'm going to introduce him in a minute, but I'm going to ask Commissioner Paul Steele, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So I guess you're going to put a flag up and we can all rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance. So Paul, if you'd lead us in that, please. And he's on mute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry about that. I was on mute.
That's okay. We got it in, Paul. Good. So I think we all followed you. Very good. Okay. Very good. All right. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. And with that, I'll ask Stacy Hayden, who's our interim commission clerk, to call the roll, and then we'll get started. And I want to read something to the record too, relative to the meeting and how to weigh in. But first, we'll go ahead and call the roll. So go ahead, Stacy, please.
Thank you, Chair Nottoli. I'm going to keep my video off because of my internet right now.
Okay.
Moving forward, Chair Nottoli.
Here.
Vice Chair Nguyen. Commissioner Villegas.
Present.
Commissioner Burgess.
Here.
You're muted, Commissioner Burgess. Calling roll.
I'm not muted.
Nope, we heard her. She was here.
Sorry, it could just be me. Again, I do apologize for my internet service today. Commissioner Vasquez.
Here.
Commissioner Fuller.
Here.
Commissioner Steele.
You're on mute, Paul.
Yes, I'm here.
Gotcha.
Commissioner Nakanishi.
Here.
Commissioner Paroli.
Here.
Commissioner Musi.
Here. Did you guys hear me?
Commissioner Lester Moffitt. Commissioner Vogel.
Here.
I believe I passed over Commissioner Slater.
Here.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bush.
We do have a quorum, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have 11 commission members present. We're ultimately expecting 14 of 15, but we do have a quorum.
Do we have any ex officio members joining us today?
Is Assemblyman Frazier? I see that Charles Dulac from Assemblyman Frazier's staff has joined, but is Assemblyman Frazier present? Okay, he might be joining us later.
I think that he'll be joining later. I don't know if you all can hear me. This is Charles Dulac with the Sun Member Jim Frazier's office. I believe he's going to be joining later on. He's coming from another meeting.
Great, thanks, Charles.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Okay, before we jump into the agenda, I just wanted to acknowledge, and I think you'll put the screen up as well, that we're meeting today remotely via Zoom, and members of the public are encouraged and certainly welcome to join by telephone by calling the number. Make sure it's the same one as up there. The number that's given here is 1-888-363-4734, and entering the conference code 388-754. I trust if you're on already, you've figured that out. It's located on top of the meeting agenda, and also would note that all the meeting materials are located at www.delta.california.ca.gov. We also, I know that Erik asked a little earlier that if you're not speaking, please put yourself on mute if you can. And for those on Zoom, the PowerPoint slides will be displayed on the screen. So if you're interested in providing public comment as a member of the public, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. Indicate that you would like to make a public comment. And if you're joining by telephone, just press number 2 to indicate you'd like to make a public comment, and certainly commission members weigh in. And if I don't catch the hands or acknowledge it, feel free to break in. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today and look forward to a good meeting. We have a pretty full agenda, and also for your willingness to work remotely to make this meeting a success. So with that, then let's go. Before we do, I want to do also, I acknowledged him and asked that he lead us in the flag salute, but we have a new commission member, Mr. Paul Steele from the city of Ileton, a new elected council member there. And I don't know, Paul, did you want to make any quick comments? This is your first meeting, and we certainly welcome you to the commission.
Yeah, I just want to tell you that I plan on being an asset to the commission. I think it's important to have representation from my area. And I'm very pleased to be nominated to serve on this commission.
Great. Welcome aboard. We're pleased to have you. So, Commissioner Nakanishi, did you want to say something? I thought I saw a hand up. Or... Okay. All right. And then just by way of note that Paul represents the cities in Sacramento and Yolo counties. He's a Sacramento Area Council of Governments appointed by the chair, Bonnie Gore, and certainly thank the SACOG for paying for their attention to filling the seat and bringing Paul to us. Okay, with that, then let's move to public comment. And this is an opportunity for the public, members of the public, and those calling in to address the commission on items that, on any item that's not on the agenda this evening or this afternoon. So do we have any, Madam Clerk or Mr. Executive Director, do we have any folks that want to address the commission on items not on the agenda?
I do not have anybody in chat at the moment, and I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Okay, so you'll watch for those then, Stacy. Thanks, and certainly
Yes.
interrupt me if you get hands raised and I don't note them on items that are as we move down the agenda. Okay, so with that, then we'll move quickly to the chair's report on Delta Stewardship Council activities. Brief report this month. The council will be meeting next week, March 25th, and we'll be having some updates as it relates to the Delta plan and discussion on issues that relate to the implementation of elements of the Delta plan. I do want to note, I know there's general awareness by commission members and others that are on the call that the council has circulated for public comment the draft of the Delta adapts plan, and the comment period closed earlier this week on Tuesday. And I know that those a lot of jurisdictions certainly have looked at the draft plan, and we've had some presentations certainly before the commission last month or when we last met, and also I know they've done some community presentations as well. But that will likely be coming to the council for further discussion at the in the May timeframe at the May meeting. And I think Erik during his report may weigh in on. I think he's going to be doing work that the commission's been engaged in at the council next week as well. So that's all I have to report here this evening. I don't know if there's any questions, and certainly I welcome any comments from commission members and on any items that are before the council on the agenda. And I work closely with Erik in coordinating comments that would reflect the commission's planning documents and certainly help guide the discussion as the Stewardship Council takes on items that certainly affect the Delta, but also mission activities and products as well. That's all I had. Any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, just a comment. I think as the Delta DAPS product gets finalized and it kind of moves into the next stage, it's incredibly important that this body track that product that has the potential to sort of set the course for a lot of what's going to happen in the Delta. And we want to make sure that as a result of all the recommendations that come out of that product, that there are the commensurate resources to address things that are going to happen to the Delta, with or without, human impacts. So I would suggest that as a request, we ask Erik to, as the agendas get put out by the Delta Stewardship Council, that we all get a copy of the agenda so we can see the issues that are happening at the Delta Stewardship Council, because we're going to be partnering with them going forward on a whole host of issues. And so this body should know the work that you're doing. Thank you for your representation, but I think it's important that this body get the agendas and peruse them for issues that might be of interest.
Very good point, Commissioner Vegas, and thank you for your work, certainly over the course of the last 2 years, and certainly you were very engaged in some of the planning and activities that went into, some of the draft that we currently see. I think that's a good suggestion. Erik, would you want to respond to that? Because I think that's excellent, because this obviously process will be ongoing for some time, but it will certainly engage all the various entities that are represented here on the commission. And I think that's an excellent suggestion by Commissioner Vegas. So, Erik?
Yeah, well, it's a very appropriate comment regarding Delta Adapts, because that will be an important council effort. And if commission members had not seen, I did send around to you earlier today a copy of a letter that I submitted on behalf of the commission on the draft vulnerability assessment. This was the report that was presented in detail at the last commission meeting. And so I did want to call attention to that, sharing the copy of that letter with commission members. And certainly it would be easy enough for us to forward the agendas for the monthly Stewardship Council meetings. And since we're on the topic, the council next meets on a week from today, next Thursday, March 25th. And I will be presenting to the council at that meeting on the economic sustainability plan, the recreation and tourism chapter update that we'll be talking about a little later in our agenda.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, Erik. And I think back to Commissioner Vegas's point, this will be, a number of months, obviously, in its review and discussion, and obviously the comments that have been, put forth by any number of agencies and organizations. And I think, carrying the Stewardship Council agendas, that information forward to commission members. But I think at appropriate points, certainly on our agenda, we should have touchbacks, if not invite, council staff to, loop us in at appropriate junctures along the way here, because I think, as Oscar said so aptly, we're going to be looped into this for a long time to come. And I think having resources to, once we get to stages of implementation, that's not to that juncture yet. I think it's going to be important for commission members, entities, organizations we represent. Fully aware, but certainly have a chance to contribute to the final product, whatever that ultimately looks like and is. So, good point. Any other comments on the Delta Adapts process or items before the Stewardship Council? Okay, if not, good suggestion, and thank you, Erik, for being willing to do that and make sure that folks get the linkage to that. So, if there's nothing further, I don't have anything further to report. Erik, something do you have?
I just wanted to mention that both Vice Chair Nguyen and Commissioner Bush joined the meeting just in the last few minutes. So we will take note of their attendance as well.
Okay, welcome, Chuck.
Thank you.
Brian, both. I think Commissioner Nakanishi, did you, I saw the icon come up. Did you wish to comment?
No.
Okay, I see the little icon with the phone. It says Commissioner Nakanishi, so I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in. Okay, thanks, Al. Very good. Okay, very good. So we're full complement here this evening, and with that, we'll move down to Commissioner comments and announcements. Stacy, anybody with a hand raised, or, and we certainly can pick this up at the end of the meeting too, but is there anything?
No hands raised at the moment.
Okay, all right. Well, if you think of something during the course of the meeting, we can end with this and say the same item. So with that, then we're going to go to our, do we have any public comments on item 4? I'm sorry, I just should have asked that. Stacy, was there any public comment?
I have no hands raised and nothing in chat.
Okay, very good. Okay, so then we'll go to consent calendar, items 6 and 7. Item 6 being consideration of the approval of the January 2021 meeting minutes, and then item 7, which is consideration of delegation of authority to the executive director to approve additional funding for Stantec as relates to the Delta Leadership Program and University Enterprises student assistance agreements. And Eric, did you want to, even though this is consent, did you want to offer any comments on either of those items?
Only if there are any questions that commission members have. Any contracts or agreements that the commission enters into that are in excess of $100,000 require the commission's approval. And even though both of these agreements have been incrementally added to over the years, they now total in excess of 100,000. So that's the reason for seeking the commission's approval on these items. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about them.
Okay, commission members, any comments or questions, any modifications to the consent calendar, 6 or 7? All right, hearing none. Any member of the public wish to comment? Stacy?
I see nothing at this time.
All right, then I'll bring it back to the commission. If there's no further comments or any questions, then a motion will be in order.
Chair Nottoli, I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Villegas seconds.
Okay, Commissioner Villegas seconds. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve consent items 6 and 7. If there's nothing further, then please call the roll.
Chair Nottoli,
Aye.
Vice Chair Wynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Villegas,
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess,
Yes.
Commissioner Vasquez,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuller,
Aye.
Commissioner Steele,
I'm going to abstain. It's my first meeting.
Commissioner Nakanishi,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Paroli,
Yes.
Commissioner Slater,
Yes.
Commissioner Musi,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester Moffitt, Commissioner Vogel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Nottoli, we have 12 yeses and 1 abstaining.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Okay, items approved. So that now moves us down to our regular agenda. And we have the item number 8, we received the executive director's report. Mr. Vink.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair and commission members. First off on my report, I just wanted to highlight some recent activities with the Delta Conveyance Project. This is the Delta Tunnel project proposed by the Department of Water Resources. Commission staff met with both DWR and Delta Conveyance Office senior management in February. And the purpose of the meeting was to talk about specifically what's called Davis-Dulwig Act, which to civilians means the obligation that the State Water Project has to provide recreation as part of its facilities. And so it's something that we've been tracking with DWR as their work proceeds on planning the Delta Tunnel project. And we just want to make sure that they're tracking recreation and specifically making plans for recreation as they proceed in the early stages of their both the design and engineering, but also ultimately the environmental analysis on their ultimate project. And I'm happy that there's already been a follow-up to that in a meeting with both ourselves, DWR, State Parks, and East Bay Regional Park District. Again, talking about what obligations under State Water Project recreational responsibilities might look like with this new feature of the State Water Project. Commission staff also provided input into the conceptual framework on the what's called the Community Benefits Program. And that's something that DWR is just announced they're holding workshops on in April and May. On the Delta Conveyance and Authority, the conveyance and the acronym puzzles me sometimes, but the Joint Powers Agency that is in charge of engineering and ultimately building the project, they recently expanded their board to 7 members. And also just today, we learned that their executive director, Catherine Mallon, will be stepping aside. She'll be providing some transition as they welcome an interim executive director for that effort. And again, this is the Joint Powers Authority that's designing and conducting the engineering on the proposed project. Related to the proposed project and in the Delta, the soil exploration that DWR is conducting is proceeding this spring. It took a pause over the winter. And finally, on the topic of the Delta Tunnel, we proceed to work with the Corps of Engineers on what's called their Section 106 process, which is how they comply with the National Historic Preservation Act. And again, as a reminder, the Corps of Engineers is the federal lead on the Delta Tunnel project, and they will be completing the environmental impact statement. And as part of the EIS, they complete this Section 106 review. And we think this is an important consultation because this project certainly has the potential to affect many historic and cultural resources in the Delta. Our hope is that the consulting parties will be meeting with the Corps of Engineers this spring, and that'll include us. Of course, local governments are welcome to join this process as well, and other parties that have a particular interest in these cultural and historic topics. So that's a long report on the Delta Conveyance Project. From there, I want to transition to broadband in the Delta. This is something that the Commission is stepping up its activity on. In February, we conducted some lunchtime webinars on how to use a California Public Utilities Commission application called CalSpeed that can help validate internet speeds. Internet service providers might claim they offer a certain level of service, but it can often be far different when you're on the using end of the internet. And so CalSpeed will actually document internet speeds for users. And so we're encouraging people throughout the Delta to utilize this application. The results are automatically forwarded to the California Public Utility Commission, and they can form a record of actual internet service speeds within a region. In terms of our next steps on broadband, they're designed to position the underserved parts of the Delta for any grant funding that may come from either state or federal sources. And this is something that we all are reading about. It's very likely that there will be support at one or both of those levels, and we certainly want to be well positioned that we can assist in taking advantage of that in underserved areas of the Delta when it is available. So this is something we'll be reporting back on to the Commission in the future. In terms of Commission operations, I just wanted to say that beginning July 1st of 2021, our contracted administrative services will transition from State Lands Commission, who we thank for providing our contract administrative services and that's a shorthand way of saying human resources, budgeting, accounting, contracts, the type of things that a small agency like ours, it doesn't make sense to have that expertise on our own staff. So we contract out the help we need with that. And State Lands has served us well over a number of years, and we will be transitioning to Department of General Services on July 1st. And we look forward to that transition. And State Lands has been great about preparing us for that ultimate transition. But I did want to mention that as an early heads up to commission members. I want to thank Stacy Hayden for stepping in as interim clerk for this meeting. Our commission clerk, Sis Hendricks, left the commission in February. We're seeking to fill her vacancy and expect to have a new commission clerk in place by the time we next meet in May. You know, we're just a little more than a year into a whole different way of operating due to the COVID pandemic. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to really tip my hat to the commission staff and really to the commissioners as well, because we've all been dealing with this. But I really want to tip my hat to the commission staff. We've been a real lesson in resilience in terms of how we've adjusted to some significant changes. We talked about this a little bit on our staff meeting earlier this week. I was probably the most hesitant and resistant to recognize that we needed to be operating in a different way. And I think everyone else kind of got there before I did. I was just holding on to my denial about how deeply this was going to affect us. But I have to say, since we've really thrown ourselves into the remote work and figuring out a different way to conduct our work and to keep the important work moving forward, I couldn't be more pleased with the effort and the resilience that our commission staff has shown. So I just wanted to take this opportunity in front of commission members and our members of the public joining our meeting to call that out. And it's especially apt as we're just this week, you know, celebrating 1 year of a whole different way of operating. And so let's hope we don't get to 2 years and that we're back to some semblance of normal very soon. And then finally, what I wanted to last mention is a reminder to commission members, which is that Form 700s, which are annual filings for the Fair Political Practices Commission, those are due by April 1st. Thank you to those commission members who have submitted theirs. And we've been receiving a flurry of them this week. If you're still working on it, please do get that into us. I'll be reaching out to you directly if we don't have yours by next week. You really don't want to be beyond that April 1st deadline. It can be financially unbeneficial to you if you don't meet the deadline. We hope it doesn't come to that. We want to be prepared to help out in any way we can. But just a reminder, those are due April 1st. And finally, I don't know if Assistant Executive Director Natasha Nielsen can pull a little photo up. There it is. I had a chance to visit with former commission member Skip Thompson, old habits die hard, just yesterday, and I was able to deliver to him this Delta Trees print by artist Gregory Condos that Greg and Monty Condos donated, and that members of the commission provided support so we could put it into that nice frame. And I have to tell you, Skip Thompson looks great. He's adapting to civilian life beautifully. And it was great to be out on his property in Pleasance Valley outside of Vacaville to present this to him. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's my report. There's other aspects of my written report that I'd be happy to answer any questions on, but I just wanted to hit the highlights briefly for you.
Well, thank you, Eric. Thank you for the report, and we'll give an opportunity for any commission member to ask any questions or weigh in. I just want to echo your comments regarding commission staff and certainly applaud them and you for your work and leadership throughout this past year and obviously going forward as well. And so thank you for those kind comments to you and your your colleagues in particular, but certainly you as the executive director, we thank you too. And thanks for presenting that to former commissioner and former supervisor Skip Thompson. And he looks like he's pretty happy and relaxed out there on the phone. So anyway, Oscar, do you have any comments?
Yeah, thank you. Just real briefly, thank you, Eric, for the presentation. I couldn't underscore more the issue of the broadband and the prospects of being able to work with our state and local partners on that issue as we contemplate how to invest our COVID relief funds. So I think there's opportunity there, and I just hope that we continue to stay in the mix, and I know you will. So that's a big one here in the region. And then also, I wanted to just flag the comments that you made about the community benefits project. I know that that's been an item that's been sort of getting framed over the last couple of months, and that is I believe it's 100 million. I think it's $100 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't know. That's what I've heard. The money available by the department or by the contractors in some form or format to offset some of the impacts of what may ultimately be a conveyance project. And the reason I want to flag that, and we can maybe have a further discussion on it at some point, is in part that I know that there have been conversations outside of this body, but members that sit on this body have had conversations about that very issue. And I wonder if, in fairness to you and staff, that maybe we have a conversation about what might be the position that this body takes relative to that, because I know they're making their rounds, they're talking to people, they're interviewing people, they're hosting a series of meetings. I know you're sharing information about the prospects of what a benefits program might look like. And I worry a little bit about sending kind of mixed messages. And so I think it might behoove, Mr. Chair, if we have staff either put on the agenda for a formal discussion, maybe some direction or some guidance or a conversation about that issue, because I think we run the risk of sending mixed messages if in fact staff is sharing the information and encouraging people to participate. If that is in fact what we want, then maybe we say that, but if it's not, maybe we say something different. I know Mr. Pruner might speak to that a little bit later. So in fairness to him and staff, we should probably maybe have a more robust conversation about that issue. So I know it's not agendized. I don't want to go too much further on it, but I did want to just flag it for purposes of the importance of it.
Okay, good suggestion. I know Commissioner Vasquez has his hand up too. So
Oscar, I totally agree. And I'm willing to share what I told them, somewhat forcefully too, about some of the things they want to do. And in particular, the leaving of assets, buildings and that. And I said, that's fine to leave us a building after 15 years, but where's the maintenance of it going to come from? That was just one aspect of it.
Okay.
But
Go ahead. Somebody else?
no.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Oscar. Eric, I don't know if you want to respond, but I do think that good point by Commissioner Villegas, and how we might certainly tailor this for either commission discussion and or some delineation behind what's at least being put forth, because I think there are some different ideas out there and hearing numbers and so forth, and they are, as Oscar and John both said, they're they being, I think, Department of Water Resources representatives, making rounds with various member jurisdictions of the commission, but also with other entities and individuals. So I don't know, Eric, did you want to respond to at least to the suggestion that we, which I think is a good one, to have this at a future agenda item or for discussion? I don't know, again, what format it would take, but I guess I leave that to you to come back to us. But
yeah, thank you. I appreciate the comments from the commission members. And I agree with you. I think this would be an appropriate agenda item even for the next commission meeting in May. I think the timing will be good at that time. And if anyone noticed me shaking my head while Commissioner Villegas was speaking, it had nothing to do with an editorial. It really had to do with his reference to a dollar number, which I've heard no mention from anyone of any dollar number so far. And I think it's very premature to suggest what that could be. So that was my little editorial head shake, had to do with the dollar number, not with the tenor of the comment, which I don't agree with. And I'll make a commitment to bring this up, because we'll certainly know a little bit more. I don't know that we're going to know much more, because at this point this is a very conceptual proposal, but we'll certainly know a little bit more. At the least, there will be presumably some feedback from these public workshops that DWR has announced that they'll be holding in April and May. But I think that'd be an appropriate time to discuss it further, and that way we can get it appropriately agendized as well.
Okay. Oscar?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, no, good. Okay. Yeah, and I just would note, I think to Oscar's point too about, not wanting to send any mixed messages, whatever those messages might be. And so I think it's good that we'll have this back and look to the agenda potentially for discussion. Oh, Commissioner Burgess.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of go back on the broadband discussion. It'd be great if we could create some sort of a graphic that could be shared in newsletters and social media. And that way we could really disperse it throughout the whole Delta area so that it's very easy to get to. And that way we could really get a good set of data.
Commissioner Burgess, are you thinking particularly about the service levels? So somehow depicting where there are deficiencies or where service isn't so great?
It could even just be a graphic that kind of talks about what's happening. And then if they click on it, it links to the testing. And that way they know what they're doing, or something combination of that. I just think it's important for people to start thinking about it, and then also to be able to, contribute to that collection of data.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the comment, and we're talking internally about how we can best present that and make it look like it really is it doesn't take a lot of time to complete that application. If you have good internet, it might be a different story if you're challenged with your internet. But we want to make sure that we don't leave people with the impression that we're asking them to invest an hour of their time. It literally takes minutes to complete it.
Yeah, I mean, even in the graphic, it could say, help us strengthen the broadband in the Delta. It'll only take a second or 15 seconds, or whatever, depending on your speed.
or 15 days, maybe. Huh?
Or 15 days, there you go. If it takes 15 days, we really want to help you.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just think it's a way of raising awareness that this is an issue that we're paying attention to, and getting the participation.
Yeah.
Good suggestion.
Thank you.
Okay, other commissioners, thank you, John, Oscar, and Diane. Other commissioners, any comments or questions about Erik's report? Any other items? Okay. All right, no hands raised, Stacy?
Not for commissioners, but we do have public comment.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, thank you for reminding me of that. So with that, then we'll go to our public comment on the executive director's report.
Great. Barbara Daly, I believe, had a public comment for us.
Okay, Barbara, good evening.
Hi. Thank you. The budget and spending for Delta Protection Commission, this graph that you gave us, Erik.
Mm-hmm.
I see that there's a budget amount of about $2 million. Under which heading would the Delta marketing campaign fall?
Good question. Assistant Executive Director Natasha Nilsson, I'm caught a little flat-footed there. I wonder if she might be able to answer that question.
When we have staff working on that, it's under economic sustainability. We currently do not have any contracts, so otherwise you would see something in contracts, but we don't break out the contracts by whether they're with heritage or recreation or marketing at this time.
Would that be something that would be possible in the future? so that we could, those of us who live in the Delta, the businesses could see how much is being spent on marketing for the Delta?
Everything except for staff time is actually on a state website. It's called open.fiscal.ca.gov. You can see every spending we have, from an AT&T bill to paying a contractor. It would be just up to you in some ways to know whether that was truly a marketing contractor. But I mean, so there's an infinite amount of detail. It's really at the pleasure of the executive director how much detail I put into that table. But I just wanted to make sure people did know, if you query Open Fiscal, and that's spelled FISCAL, it should show up for you. And you just need a filter to Delta Protection Commission. We have both last fiscal year and everything up through December of this year shown on that website.
Yeah, we could certainly take a look at how we break this information out in the, the budget and spending report that we make to the commission. I will note that it's estimated. We don't track, we don't track our time that carefully in terms of assigning it to particular projects. So I would say this is a pretty broad estimate of where, we spend the commission's resources, primarily, which is staff resources, but it's not an exact number by any means.
Yes, thank you. Since we're going to be talking about the economic sustainability plan and specifically recreation, which is one of the top economic drivers of the Delta, marketing the recreation and tourism is important to the businesses in the Delta. So I just wanted to bring that up as the business representative of DPAC.
Yeah,
So,
we hear you loud and clear on that.
thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Any other comments? Anyone else from the public? Stacy? Any other public comments?
No public comments.
Okay, very good. Okay, thanks, Eric. Thanks, Barbara. Okay, that's our executive director's report. And unless there's anything further, let's move on to item 9, which is receive a report from the Delta Protection Advisory Committee. And again, Mr. Pruner, who's the chair of that group, we welcome him and thank him for his attendance. And Mark, we'll turn over to you.
Thank you, Chair Nottoli, members of the commission. Your Delta Protection Advisory Committee met on March 2nd. We had our usual 2-hour meeting. This one, I think, was just a little bit longer. We've now become a bit more professionalized, as I announced at the January meeting. We've got a meeting schedule, which we adopted for the whole year. And while I'm on that topic, for any folks that are members of the public or for commission members, our next meeting is set for May the 4th. First thing that we did was, I think, really important, and that is to have a little conversation with Dr. Jessica Rednick, who is the newly appointed social science extension specialist. I think I said that correctly. And I think the members are really excited about Dr. Rednick's participation, looking forward to what her contribution will be, especially in the social science aspect of what happens and is happening in the Delta. I think the feeling of most of the committee members is that the science in the Delta has predominantly focused on fish and water and physical sciences, but kind of left communities out, left people out. And our hope is that Dr. Rednick can pull some threads together that will be genuinely helpful to everybody, all activities, not just people, but everybody in what's happening in the Delta. We then heard a series of reports, and I just want to acknowledge, I think I have this correct, that committee members Barbara Daly, who you've heard from, Jim Cox, and Russ Ryan are participating in this meeting, and just acknowledge their contributions. Specifically, Mr. Cox reported on meetings of the Stakeholder Engagement Committee, talking about the Bethany bypass a bit, and which is an important change in the engineering proposal of the tunnel construction project, or proposal at this point. And we talked a little bit about the proposed community benefit agreement. I'd appreciate Commissioner Villegas, my supervisor, for mentioning that. We had heard at the DPAC presentation, it was very fresh at the time from DWR, and that process is working its way through. You know, what it results in or how significant it's going to be is yet to be determined, but I absolutely agree with Commissioner Villegas that it's really important that the people in the Delta interest, speak as one voice, and not, and well, just speak as one voice. I think that sums up a lot. We heard an update from staff member Virginia Gardiner on the ESP. We gave her some feedback, and I think she I believe she made some changes to the ESP and her project that she's working on. As part of that, the committee members emphasized the continued need for high-speed internet, wireless communication in the Delta. It'd just be so helpful to all of our residents, businesses, everybody. And we're glad to hear that Erik is not at all losing focus on that. And I think that concern and solving that concern is very much a high priority of staff. We heard our second update from the Bureau of Reclamation, Mario Manzo, who's the deputy, what is his title? Is deputy director, I believe, something similar to that for reclamation, gave us a little bit of an upgrade on the cross-channel project. One of the things that stuck with me is that they had anticipated finding more wear in the gates, but when they're getting into it and looking at the details of the gates, those gates aren't as worn as they thought, and how that translates to the project is a bit unclear at the moment. I'm sure we're going to get another report either at the May meeting or perhaps at the July meeting. And I think we talked about the National Heritage Area and heard some updates and general discussion and provide our input to Dr. Blake Roberts, who you're going to hear from a bit later. And I think we're doing our job primarily at this last meeting at staff level, providing input, being involved in the federal side more than we have in the past, and kind of at this moment being behind the scenes and giving help and feedback to staff. And that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for your leadership as chair, and certainly to your fellow members who are both here with us this evening and others that participate. Again, you play a very important role, and appreciate ongoing activities that you're engaged in. Any questions or comments by commission members? Mr. Pruner?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I could just let the commission members know, our Delta Protection Advisory Committee is now on a schedule where every May, 5 of the 15 committee members' terms are up. And so we just announced this week that nominations are available for terms that will be up for appointment in May of 2021. We'll bring this to the next commission meeting. And this go around, we have the representatives for Delta Business, Delta Agriculture, Delta Conservation and Habitat, nonprofit organization, Delta Recreation, and state agency. Those terms will be up for appointment. It's possible that we will have existing current committee members reapplying, but I would expect that at least there will be a few true vacancies. And so that's something that I'll bring back to the commission at the May 20th meeting.
Okay, thanks, Erik. Anything else? All right, any hands? Stacy?
There are no hands or comments at this time.
Okay, so no public comments. Okay. All right, again, thanks to Chair Pruner and the committee members. We'll move on then to item 10, which is to receive a report from our Delta Watermaster, Mr. Michael George, who's been with us on previous occasions and always brings good information, and certainly welcome him. Did Eric any introductory comments for Mr. George before we jump into his presentation?
No, I'll turn it over to Michael. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Michael, you're on. Good evening.
That's good. I need no introduction. I'm flattered. And thank you, Chair Nottoli. I know you've got a big agenda, and Eric has asked me in my discussion tonight to focus on one issue that's really critical to all of us, and that is preparedness for drought conditions. Next slide, please. So I want to do that. I want to honor your time and focus on what's going on with respect to preparation for drought and how some of that may affect the Delta itself. But I want to start, next slide please, by focusing or at least commenting a little bit on what's going on statewide, and to particularly mention some takeaways from the State Water Resources Control Board workshop on drought preparedness, which took place on February 16th. The first and most important takeaway, which I'll talk about a little bit more in relation to the Delta, is the likely impacts of continuing dry conditions. We're late in the rainy season and we haven't had much rain, notwithstanding what we've gotten here, a little bit sprinkles over the last few days. And I'll talk more about where we are with respect to dry conditions and how those are likely to impact the Delta watershed and the Delta itself. But if that's the bad news, which I'll get into a little bit more later, the good news is that we have made improvements in what we know and how we can manage as a water use community since the last drought, since the drought that ended in with an average year in 2016 and then a wet year in 2017. We have learned a lot from that. We've refined some of the tools, and I particularly want to call out a couple of things that the State Water Board's Division of Water Rights has done in the reporting what we've learned and what kind of outreach we've done and what kind of suggestions have come to us about how to manage in the future. And probably most importantly, the Division of Water Rights has developed much better, more refined tools throughout the watershed for looking at supply and demand, and has actually created a visualization tool that allows users to hone in on certain aspects, certain areas, even certain water rights throughout the Delta watershed. It's not finished for reasons that I'll talk about in a bit, but it will very shortly be made available broadly for use and comment. We've had some kind of beta testers recently, and I think it's a tool that is much more acute than the watershed-wide monthly time step supply-demand tools that we used last time. But I also want to mention, you've already talked about the Delta Adapts project that the Delta Stewardship Council talked to you about last time, and that we've all kind of reviewed and made comments on. It's focusing on the short-term impacts of the drought that we're facing again, but also the longer-term impacts from climate change. And I think we need to keep in mind both the short-term acute issues with respect to drought or flood or other impacts, whether it's earthquakes or other disruptions. We've also got to look over the horizon and what's going on with respect to climate change. Next slide, please. So having said that about broadly what's going on statewide with respect to drought preparedness, there are a lot of specific initiatives that affect the Delta more specifically. And I want to focus now on a couple of slides on those. We've really spent a lot of effort on improving our water use data with the idea that making that data more accessible, more open, more comparable, more accurate and timely has been one of the big efforts that we've been working on since the last drought. One of those is untangling riparian from pre-14 claims. Those are the prevalent senior claims in the Delta, and we've worked to overcome some of the misconceptions, not only within the Delta, but probably as importantly outside the Delta. So we published in 2018 a legal memorandum trying to differentiate between pre-14 and riparian rights. There was a broad misconception that if great-granddad was irrigating prior to 1914, or maybe by this time it's great-great-great-granddad, if there was irrigation prior to 1914, that meant that the land had and perfected a pre-1914 right. Whereas in fact, the nature of pre-14 rights and riparian rights have different elements, and that legal memorandum kind of laid out those principles. More recently, and importantly, last summer, the Third District Court of Appeals rendered its decision in, what turned out to be about 7 or 8 years of litigation in the Tanaka decision. And then a couple of months later, the Supreme Court of the state of California indicated that they were not going to entertain an appeal. So that Third District Court decision is the final unappealable order. And it was valuable in explaining in current terms what the principles are for determining riparian rights in the Delta. And I won't go into the details of that, but we've been applying those principles pretty effectively, pretty successfully, and pretty cooperatively throughout the Delta in the months since that decision came down and since the Supreme Court made it final. We've settled now 5 cases. We have got an agreement to settle a 6th case, and we're working on a 7th case where we're applying those principles and getting settlements that essentially confirm the riparian rights in all 7 of those cases. We're also working and have been successful in gaining a consensus approach to reducing duplicative reporting, where the same water for the same use from the same point of diversion is reported in 2 different places, one potentially under a license and the other under a riparian or pre-14 right. It's important that we get this right, because as these data are aggregated, particularly folks outside the Delta who are not as familiar with how those reports overlap, come to the conclusion that the Delta is actually using way more water than it is. And so that's where some of the arguments that the Delta is wasting water or using too much water, and then the idea that we might be able to wring water out of the Delta for use elsewhere. And while that's not the case, the duplicate reporting is something that we're trying to focus on, and we've developed a consensus with the water community so that we'll only report the water once, although we'll protect both the licensed right and the underlying more senior right. We've also proposed, the Division of Water Rights and the Office of the Delta Watermaster within the state board, have proposed legislation to improve and make it easier for reporters to accurately report what they actually use. And so that, I'm pleased to say that legislation is moving forward. We expect it to be enacted this year, either as a regular bill or potentially as a trailer bill. And what it will do will allow all water use to be reported at the same time, and all water use to report on use during the same period. So instead of what we've got in the water code that is developed over time, where some people report in July and some people in April and still others in December, will consolidate all the reports to come in at the same time. And probably more importantly, all of those reports will relate to the same period of time. So everybody will report on a water year basis, and everybody will report at the beginning of February if this legislation were to be enacted. That'll make the information more timely. It'll allow it to be developed on a more consistent basis. And most importantly, we'll have that information early in the ensuing water year so that it can be used to inform decisions during the period when water is most in need, which is in the irrigation season in the summer. We're also pursuing improvements in our own regulations. We're working now with the water community to tone up some of those regulations. We'll be talking more about that later. I don't want to get into too much detail here. And finally, and probably equally importantly, we're using new technology, principally open data standards and satellite imaging to reduce the burden on water users for their reports and to get that water information on a more consistent, timely basis. Next slide, please. So overall, the background here is that as we approach a time of natural shortage in the entire watershed, we're trying to create partnerships to manage drought better than we did the last time. And I think we've kind of heard from the water community and certainly experienced ourselves that in the last drought, there was too much top down from the water board. And what we needed was to have a richer exchange of information so that people could plan better and coordinate their plans better. So we're trying to make that a reality for drought planning for the next drought, which we think is on our doorstep. So the first thing we do, and the reason for this map, I'm really preaching to the choir here because you all understand that the Delta is not a monolith. It's not a black box. It's different regions that have different needs and different impacts from drought and different approaches to drought. So in the North Delta, we've got a contract under which essentially the State Water Project underwrites water use in that part of the Delta. There's a similar contract for East Contra Costa Irrigation District. And of course, the Contra Costa Water District operates under a federal water supply contract. So a lot of the issues where, as we used to say in Minnesota, where I grew up, where the cheese comes to bind is in the Central Delta and South Delta. So we're working with the different regions, but looking at where we can cooperate to address problems that are common, either to a region, for the Delta, or for the entire Delta watershed, or indeed for the entire state. But one of the things that really has come out strongly in our understanding through this retrospective and through planning for drought is that the impacts of water shortages fall not uniformly throughout the Delta and not uniformly within the Delta. It impacts most acutely environmental and ecosystem services in the Delta and the disadvantaged communities in the Delta. We're trying to be more proactive about outreach to bring in other voices, other needs, so that they're at the table, so that as we are developing strategies for confronting water shortage, there are more voices at the table. We can make better and better informed decisions. And that leads to the notion of gathering and sharing information so that all of us who are planning for shortage are taking into account the richest Delta information that we've got, that it's shared broadly so that we can make decisions adequately informed about what's going on. And finally, we're trying to make that information more available. The last point on here is a partnership with the California Water Data Consortium to make these data, this information, much more widely available, interactive with multiple users, multiple models, et cetera, so that we can all make better informed decisions. Next slide, please. this is just a bit of a retrospective. I keep talking about the last drought. These are the California drought maps that were taken in March of years 14, 15, and 16. So this is what we were facing the last time. And we recognized that the water communities throughout the state really got us through the drought because they were implementing plans that they had developed over a long period of time, because drought wasn't a surprise to anybody. And it was something that water users and water managers had understood and planned for. And it was really that implementation of those plans that got us through the last drought. But one of the things we also recognized that by 2016, all the rabbits had been pulled out of the hat. And if 2016 had ended as significantly drought impacted as it started, we would not have had probably the ability economically from an ecosystem service standpoint, or certainly from an agricultural use standpoint, we wouldn't have been able to get through. We were able in 2016 to have what was at the time considered an average year, and then 2017 really bailed us out, caused other problems, the whiplash between drought and flood. But now, having looked at that, let's go to the next slide, which shows us more about where we are now. So 2020 was a dry year, moderate or abnormally dry in most areas, with moderate drought in the Delta watershed. But one of the things that really helped us last year was it was a wet year in Southern California. So a lot of the demands that we would ordinarily have seen impact the Delta were to move water to populated parts of the state, to let's say Kern County and other areas served from or partly from the Delta. They got a lot of water last year. Nonetheless, we drew down reservoirs pretty substantially, and going into 2021, we're looking at a sequence of years that suggest to us that we are going to be facing the kind of severe drought that we looked at and dealt with in 2014, 15, and came out of starting in 16, and then relieved from with the wet year in 17, and then another wet year in 19. So that's why we're doing this kind of planning. And just flipping to the last slide here, this is kind of where we are, what we're trying to prepare for, so that we can keep the Delta as green as that picture suggests. I do want to call out partnerships and help within the Delta where water supply is not as much of a problem, even in drought circumstances, but still we're having people in the Delta step up and talk about what we can do in the Delta to assuage some of the pressure on the system. And I'm pleased that those conversations are going on, and happy to be involved in them, and look forward to some of those coming to fruition in terms of voluntary agreements to help in the Delta to assuage some of the shortage throughout the state. So with that, I'll shut up and allow for any questions there might be.
Thanks again, Michael. We really appreciate it. You always a wealth of information, and certainly encapsulate a lot of good information, and very current, a lot of currency to what you just presented. So let me turn to fellow commissioners. Any questions or comments of Michael and his presentation?
Commissioner Steele has his hand up, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Steele.
Mr. George, I'd like to ask you, in all the studies that are being done, is the salinity level, the rising salinity level in the Delta, actually it's two questions. Is the rising salinity level in the Delta even taken into respect in all these studies you're talking about?
Absolutely. So I'm focused on water shortage in terms of quantity, but clearly, as quantity is reduced in shortage, there are directly associated salinity and water quality issues. Those are currently most acutely being felt in the southern delta, where we have had exceedances of the salinity objectives. There was a brief one near the end of January that was ameliorated briefly by the single significant storm series that we've had this year. But by February 11th, that salinity exceedance arose again, and it has been with us ever since. And this is before the irrigation season starts. So with a relatively high objective of 1.0 EC, we are really scrambling to address the salinity issue, particularly acute in the South Delta, where the irrigation season starts. And in part, some of our drought preparedness is focused on what do we do if we start to have salinity intrusion through the Carquinez Straits, as we suffered in 2015. So we're starting to look at salinity barriers or management decisions that we can make to change salinity. And again, it's providing rich information to users in the Delta because, for instance, even though we may have salinity, let's say, moving up from Edmonton or 3 Mile Slough, users in the Delta know that because the tide is moving back and forth, there are times within a day when if you're irrigating at one time, you're getting water that is of low quality, whereas if you can defer, you can get water of high quality at a different time. So yes, salinity planning is absolutely part of what we're focused on.
I'm glad you said that. Because I live in Isleton, I'm acutely aware of this situation. And the other thing is, my other question to you was, before I moved to Isleton, I lived up in Shasta Lake City. And I think my figures were right when I left there, that about 83% of Shasta Lake goes for irrigation, and that directly comes down the Sacramento River. So my question to you, sir, would be, you know, because we have this infrastructure deal coming from Congress, and we've got a whole bunch of money coming from the pandemic. Is there any discussions into building a new reservoir, something substantial that can help the people down south and not divert so much money or so much water out of the Delta?
So there are longstanding, ongoing discussions. Nothing ever moves quickly, and certainly when you're talking about surface storage, there's a process that the Water Commission is going through to allocate about $2.7 billion of bond money to a series of reservoir projects that are in development. None of them is an on-stream reservoir. I think I'm right that only one of them is north of the Delta. And I think I'm also right that as you look at the storage, the emphasis is shifting to groundwater storage. And that's partly a result of implementation of Sigma. And it's partly a result that the Delta supply is increasingly understood to be highly variable. And so if we're coming into a shortage time, that variability is going to impact. Now, in Southern California, urban areas have done a lot to allow themselves to adjust to the variability of supply from the Delta, but it's much harder in the San Joaquin Valley, where there's been a shift toward permanent crops. So their ability to vary their demands are...
I understand what you're saying. I do understand what you're saying, but this has been a long-term problem in the state of California. I mean, this isn't just popped up like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, actually. And with the increased amount of people that naturally are going to inhabit the state, just because that's what happens. I was just wondering if there was any consideration into building a new reservoir. I'll put it out that way. Building a new reservoir, because even groundwater, I think, is, and I think you'll agree with me on that, is dependent on not having droughts. And we cannot control Mother Nature, but we can take stipulations to prepare ourselves when Mother Nature doesn't suit our directive.
So it goes beyond today's discussion, but I would love to have a conversation with you offline about all the things that are going on to increase storage. There's sites north of the Delta. There's the expansion of Los Vaqueros in Contra Costa County. There's a new reservoir at Pacheco. There's a proposal for one at
well, I'm sure that my constituents, when they know that I'm on this committee, are going to ask me that question. So yeah, I look forward to meeting with you.
Good. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Paul. Good questions, and I think Michael, your offer certainly to Paul is a good one, because again, obviously you're a wealth of knowledge, and I think his questions certainly are ones that are relevant not only to his constituents but to a lot of other folks. So, Paul, if that's okay with you, let Michael follow up with you, and if there's other information we can, assist with, certainly, the commission's here to serve you.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other members of the commission? Any comments or questions, Mr. George? Okay. Any other hands raised? Then any member of the public, Stacy?
None at this time.
Okay. All right. Erik, anything you want to conclude with?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Once again, Michael, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Steele, for your questions, and we look forward to your updates when we come together. And again, thank you. And hopefully we'll get, by the time we next come together in May, maybe we'll get some really good, water activity, rain and snow, and hopefully, not have that map look as dramatic as it did in the 14, 15, 16 years. So.
Yeah, it's a little late for a miracle March, but maybe we'll have an abundant April.
Very good. Okay. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Nottoli, we
Yes, sure.
do have Barbara Daly now asking to speak again.
Okay, sure. Okay, just under the wire. Okay, Barbara.
Whew. Just made it.
Yes.
I have 3 questions and a comment.
Sure.
Mr. George, there you are. We've had this discussion before, and you just made the comment Kern County got a lot of water last year, and they have one of the largest underground water reservoirs in the state. And we've talked about restoring Tulare Lake Basin as an underground reservoir. So I just wanted to make that comment. I know that is a long discussion, but I just wanted to say that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention or ask about is you made the comment, we're wringing water out of the Delta to use elsewhere. And to me, that is the truth. We're at the bottom of the spigot, and the Delta watershed is directly affected by the releases from Shasta and Oroville and the many diversions north of us. So I was wondering, where does that fall in the list of the drought initiatives list that you made?
So Barbara, thank you for the question. And I hope I fear I wasn't clear. I've said to anybody who will listen that it is a mistake to think that there is water being wasted in the Delta, and that if we just had better water management activities in the Delta, we could wring water out of the Delta for productive use elsewhere. I don't believe that, and I tell anybody who will listen that it's a chimera. It doesn't exist, and don't plan around it. And I've been pretty vociferous about that in the Central Valley, in the South Southern California area. So if I when I use that phrase, I meant to say that doesn't work, that doesn't happen. So in terms of drought preparedness and drought planning, there are discussions about transfers from Northern California, part of the Delta watershed, across the Delta to serve needs in Southern California. Those trades happen whenever there are dry years. In one sense, Barbara, they're advantageous, because if we can get people north of the Delta, up in the watershed, to use less water and to make it available to people in south the Delta, that actually puts more fresh water through the Delta. And I know it results in more pumping out of the Delta, but that's water that otherwise wouldn't be there. So it does, to a certain extent, offset some of the acute impacts on water quality in the Delta by letting that water run through. On the other hand, there can be long-term negative impacts of that, and they come in kind of two flavors. One is if it's paper water, or if it's backfilled in the north through groundwater pumping that is going to hit the river later. That's one issue. But the second issue, which is really, I think, more of an acute issue, is it perpetuates the myth that you can have permanent demands serviced by variable supply. And that's really a lot of what has happened with this shift in Central Valley agriculture toward permanent crops. And it's becoming more acute now because of implementation of Sigma. It used to be, when there was a shortage, Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley agriculture could turn to groundwater pumping. As we begin to implement Sigma, that's less the case. So what we're going to see this year in terms of drought is the beginning of a long-term perfect storm of reduced groundwater availability in the San Joaquin Valley, more variability as indicated in the vulnerability assessment that we talked about earlier, that are going to make the through Delta water supply inherently more variable. And so we've got to work on that big problem. Yeah, we can paper it over, we can put a Band-Aid on it through some of these transfers that have short-term benefits. But if that just perpetuates or allows this permanent demand for a variable supply, that's a problem for all of us in California.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Barbara, for the question.
Two more questions.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
In the 7 court cases that you mentioned, how many kept their riparian rights?
So 5 have been settled, and the board has adopted an order. All 5 of them kept their riparian rights.
Okay.
We've got one that we have negotiated. We got signatures from all parties, which we'll be taking forward, and another one that we're working on. In the one that we've settled, they kept their riparian rights. In all 6 of those so far, we've come to an agreement that they have riparian rights, but that they will not claim that they are diverting under pre-14 rights unless and until they come forward with evidence of those pre-14 rights. And I, as Delta Watermaster, maintain the right to challenge that evidence if it is brought forth. My own view is that in the cases that we've settled, the riparian rights are good. There are no pre-14 rights.
Good enough, I guess. So in the 2018 legal memorandum of principles, where can we get a copy of that?
It's right on the front page of the Delta Watermaster website.
Thank you. Okay. Thank
Good.
you.
You bet. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, thanks, Michael, for responding. Any other comments or questions, Madam Clerk?
None at this time.
Okay, good. I know we're getting long on the agenda here, so we'll keep moving. We've got a couple items that require commission action. So with that, again, thanks to Michael, and thanks to Barbara for her questions. And let's go down into item number 11, which is receive a report on the Delta National Heritage Area Management Plan, development of that, and to consider delegating authority to Executive Director to accept additional National Heritage Area federal funding as it would become available. So With that, we're going to turn to Dr. Blake Roberts. Blake.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Nottoli and members of the commission. My name is Blake Roberts, and I am a program manager 1 with the commission and coordinator for the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta National Heritage Area. Tonight, I will be providing an update on the National Heritage Area and ask for commission action on an item involving National Heritage Area funding. Since our last update, the National Heritage Area Management Plan Advisory Committee held meetings on January 5th and March 4th. Commission staff, the Point Heritage Development Consulting Team, and California State Park staff presented to the advisory committee on several items, including the management plan process and schedule, best practices from other national heritage areas, the proposed communication strategy, and potential interpretive themes. We are now forming 4 advisory task groups that will focus on specific topics and report back to the advisory committee. At least one of these task groups will be meeting before our next advisory committee meeting on May 6th. We have also been working with our consultants and National Park Service staff to discuss the management plan process and timeline so we can ensure the National Park Service review is as smooth as possible. The action item before you involves accepting additional funding for the National Heritage Area. The National Park Service recently advised commission staff that grant funding for federal fiscal year 2021 would be $157,500, $3,209 more dollars than fiscal year 2020. Staff is requesting that the commission delegate authority to the executive director, to amend the existing cooperative agreement with the National Park Service to accept an additional approximately $157,500 in federal fiscal year 2021 funding. We are requesting flexibility for the executive director to accept an amount that is approximately $157,500, as the amount might change slightly as it did in the last fiscal year. Thank you for your time. We appreciate your consideration of the amendment to the cooperative agreement.
Okay, thank you, Blake, for your very concise report. So let me turn to commission members then and see if there are questions and comments about anything you presented or anything that they have regarding the work on the National Heritage Area. Any hands up, Stacy?
No, there is not.
Okay. Then see anyone from the public, no members of the public?
No hands up or commentary from the public at the moment.
All right, Eric, anything before I call for a motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. Okay, so with that, then this is an actionable item. So a motion to delegate the authority as noted in Blake's report would be, motion be in order. We have a motion.
Mr. Chair, this is Villegas. I would move the item.
Okay. Second. Chair was second.
Vogel, I would second that.
Okay, Nancy. Okay, you got it. Good. Okay. All right. Motion by Commissioner Vegas, second by by Member Vogel, and so the motion is to approve the staff recommendations outlined. And if there's no further comments or questions, then I would ask Stacy to call it up.
Thank you. Chair Nottoli?
Aye.
Vice Chair Wynn?
Yes.
Commissioner Villegas?
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess?
Yes.
Commissioner Vasquez?
Yes.
Commissioner Fuller?
Yes.
Commissioner Steele?
Yes.
Commissioner Nakanishi? Commissioner Nakanishi? Commissioner Nakanishi, it looks like you're muted. Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Paroli? Don't see Commissioner Paroli here. Commissioner Slater,
Yes.
Commissioner Musi,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bush,
I believe Commissioner Bush left a little after 5 o'clock.
thank
Stacy.
you. And Chair Nottoli, we have 11 yeses and 0 nos, 0 abstains.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And so motion is approved, and nothing further on that. We'll move down then to item 12, which is consideration of the approval of the Economic Sustainability Plan, Recreation and Tourism Chapter update. There's been a lot of work, and we've had periodic updates from our executive director and from our program manager, Virginia Gardiner, over the past number of months. And so we now have before us the completed product, which they're seeking approval for. And then obviously we'll have some discussion and outlines for, the next steps for implementation. So with that, unless you have any opening comments, Mr. Vink will go to our program manager, Virginia Gardiner. So thanks. Virginia, you're on.
Good evening, Chairman Nottoli and commissioners. We do have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm not sure if it's, there we go. Wonderful. I'm happy to be presenting this evening on the final draft of the Economic Sustainability Plan chapter, Recreation and Tourism chapter update. I'm going to make a brief presentation here and then ask the Commission for action to approve the final chapter. Just next slide, thank you. For a quick recap on the history of the update, we kicked off in mid-2019 with data gathering and research of related reports prepared since the 2012 ESP, as well as modeling of updated visitation and other stats. We also, to understand some of the whys of what has been happening economically, we also met with 5 focus groups in March and April of 2020 and presented those results to the Commission at the July meeting in 2020. The public draft was made available for review in November of 2020 at the Commission meeting, and outreach to gather public input actually began in October 2020 and went on through the end of January of 2021. And with final revisions, this report is now before you for your approval. One item I wanted to mention about what happened to the public comments. We compiled meeting summaries with a Q&A that have been posted on the website. And the input we received generally fell into 2 categories. The comments were either directly incorporated into the chapter, as in corrections, factual information, or clarifying and expanding points and making minor corrections. Or they were compiled as a list of specific suggestions and recommendations that we will be looking at as part of the future steps that would be taken up by the proposed partnership group. So examples of this second category of future changes and comments would be the suggestion that a dock at the Westin Hotel in West Sacramento should be explored as a possible stopping place for excursion boats from the Bay Area. That's a specific suggestion that we would take up in the future. And another might be what might be the expected impacts of the National Heritage Area designation on recreation funding as the recognition of the NHA increases. So I hope that helps understand the 2 types of category of public comment that we received and what we did with them. Next slide, please. So of course, during this entire process, we've had a steady focus on the desired outcome, which is that recreation and tourism together are the second most important pillar of the Delta economy. And we really wanted to focus our goal on how best to ensure that it does thrive and is sustainable. Next slide, please. So we focused in on the most impactful economic features, which are really short-term our recommendations are more short-term strategies to solve problems in the areas that have the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak, have the most strong economic impact. And those areas really are marinas and boating and the legacy community related recreation and tourism businesses. One of the comments that we received at the DPAC related to going beyond the legacy communities specifically. And that would be something, again, that we would take up in consideration with the partnership group that we're proposing. So next slide, please. So our recommended actions and focus involve partnerships at the state, local, federal, and private levels. We want to focus also on action. We are prioritized based on a combination of significance to the economy, immediate or short-term effect, in other words, effects that will take place as soon as possible, and durability. In other words, has the recommendation been made and remained valid over a period of years, as many of these recommendations have. Next slide, please. And then also, we wanted to have demonstrated fairly universal support. And the recommendations that you see on these slides have those qualities. For example, the desire to remove water hazards and abandoned vessels. That's a very durable, ongoing issue that everyone pretty much supports throughout the Delta. Next slide, please. We want to support partnership at all levels, including, as I said, both public and private and non-governmental organizations. And some of the partners that we already engage with, for example, the Division of Boating and Waterways, we would continue and strengthen these relationships. And others we would expand and strengthen in different ways, such as with local governments that we already have relationships with, but we would want to explore, for example, the permitting challenges that some of the local governments have. Next slide, please. So there are potential participants that we have seem to be natural relations. Naturally, we want to include our existing partners, our sister Delta agencies, such as the Sacramento San Joaquin Conservancy and the Delta Stewardship Council. They would continue, but perhaps we would want to strengthen them or target for project-specific purposes. And then, as important would be new or expanded working partnerships with other state agencies, where we would also need expanded participation and also shared project-specific goals. Next slide, please. So, of course, expanding the efforts to get the word out about the Delta would be important as well. So here and in your staff report are presented the approach for our next steps, which we hope will begin implementing within 6 months of convening a group that would be composed of the agencies and organizations that we just described on the previous slide. And just to note, an important element of the process would be to determine how to define and measure success. That's going to be something that we consider to be very important. Next slide, please. As part of our follow-up, which is that we want to make sure to report our progress to the Commission and to other participating decision-making agencies. And we want to make sure that whatever structure or structures are developed by the group will be evaluating effectiveness and considering any adjustments that we need to make to improve. And of course, any progress that we make should be celebrated and advanced. So that is the conclusion to my presentation. I'm willing to answer any questions from commissioners, and also our consultants, the Dangerman Group, are also here if there are questions. And otherwise, we would request your approval of the updated chapter. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Virginia. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks for all the work that's contributed to the information that's before us this evening. And thank you to the Dangerman Group for their assistance and work in this regard too. So let me turn to commission members. Questions or comments regarding the economic sustainability plan, the update on the recreation and tourism chapter. Any hands raised?
I still can't figure out how to raise my hand, Mr. Chair, but I do have a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Vegas.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia, for the great work you've been doing on this, your diligent work on this for quite some time. And I think it's particularly important in light of what the presentation that was just in front of you or before yours, in light of the fact that we are, on the verge of the prospects of, significant times, challenges with our waters in drought form, and that's going to directly impact the recreation and tourism. And it did last time in 2014, 15, and 16 in a big way. Those meetings were tough. They were tough meetings, but particularly by the folks that were trying to manage or sustain their business efforts. I mean, they were struggling in the worst possible way. So I think this is a critical piece of our work, and incorporating aspects of the likelihood of some challenging times ahead is going to be critically important. So thank you for your work.
Good comments. I would just note on kind of piggybacking what you said, Oscar. I think certainly what kind of jumps out to me, beyond all the efforts that we're going to continue to put forward to try to I think support recreation in the Delta. When I look at the numbers, and I think to the point, over a 10-year period or less than 10 years from the time we did the economic sustainability plan 2012, and you look at the current update, and more than a full quarter of the recreation-related establishments in the primary zone no longer there. They're gone, at least by the count that was provided in our report. And then you look at some of the related activities of services that would, certainly provide services to those in boating and recreation and different aspects both on the waterways, but adjacent to, and, better than 20% reduction in a couple of cases. And, still a major economic impact, but a decline of, nearly $100 million in estimated, annual impact to counties and communities and all the various businesses. And so I just think that that is kind of stark, and yet I think the plan certainly this update offers some opportunities for us to hopefully get behind businesses and promote it, again, recognizing that, as others have said in some of the early items, Mother Nature is going to bring what it comes to us. But I think the impacts potentially that we saw a few years back and the residual, but also what may lie ahead and what we heard earlier this evening. So not discouraging, but certainly concerning. I would just say that'd be my comment to some of the information here, but still a good body of work, Virginia. So thank you to you and the consultants. Others any comments about any of the information in the report or executive summary?
Commissioner Steele has his hand raised.
Yes, Commissioner Steele, Paul. I don't know if you're muted or not, Paul, and your volume is a little loud at times too. So
I want to thank you again for dealing with this. Our local area here in Islington has taken a huge blow from the pandemic, and we still have viability. We don't have to rebuild totally, but anything that we can do to help realign our tourism industry would be extremely helpful here. So could you elaborate a little bit to me on would they be like a grant funding or anything like that? Like if we needed to rebuild a dock or?
Thanks for the question, Commissioner Steele, and welcome aboard. Yes, actually, we're definitely aware of the serious impacts that the whole pandemic situation has had on things like restaurants, all of the communities throughout the Delta. While we've heard that recreational boating has been helped in some ways, it definitely has caused real serious impacts for a lot of the businesses in areas like Ileton. Specifically about grants, what we would be looking to this collaborative partnership to do would be identifying funding sources of different types. So many of because we're a public agency, we focus on what can the public agencies do for public facilities. But we would also be looking to partnering with private industry and with non-governmental organizations to see where private investment could also be expanded. One of the things that I think would be necessary would for this group, this umbrella group, have a subcommittee that would be specifically focused on funding and such issues as looking into economic development. And I think that would be a major focus. Another element of this issue would be how we can advance the broadband capabilities throughout the Delta. And that, again, is a major tie-in that isn't really addressed per se in the text of the recreation and tourism update, but has been very much a part of our mindset.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Steele. Any other commissioner, any other questions or comments?
There are no raised hands.
Okay, then we'll go to members of the public. Any members of the public?
Yes, we have a request from Barbara Daly.
Okay, very good. Okay, Barbara.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I want to say, put kind of a frame around this. Erik did send me the full, or sent all of us actually, the full document about 10 days ago, but I wasn't able to download it. So I don't know for sure if exactly everything I'm talking about has been covered in it or not. And Virginia also made a great effort to send it to me after our last conversation, but Virginia, I couldn't I couldn't download it. It wouldn't let me do that. I don't know why. So I just wanted to say that to me, at least, I haven't looked at it, but it didn't cover the cultural tourism in the Delta fairly or enough, or as much as the recreational part of this chapter. And I just didn't want that part to lose out on the opportunity for the commission's ability to monitor the economic development of the tourism in the Delta. And I know, Virginia, you said that it might be covered in another part of, at another chapter, and when these other chapters are updated. But if these other chapters never get funding to be updated, I would just hope that this chapter would be able to be that placeholder for the cultural tourism in the Delta.
Yeah, if I can just step in, I appreciate that comment, Barbara. You know, heritage tourism, cultural and heritage tourism is going to be a really critical feature of the National Heritage Area. So it's something we're going to be spending a lot more time and effort on. It's not it's certainly not at the level of boating recreation and marina-based recreation in terms of where it contributes currently. But I don't think there's any question that it's going to be an important contributor as we get this National Heritage Area up and running. You know, that really links directly to everything the NHA is about.
Right, right, Erik. And Virginia and I were talking about that, and my thought on that was, what if the National Heritage Area breaks off from the Delta Protection Commission and is handled by maybe a private nonprofit or something like that? Then then our ability to monitor it by the Delta Protection Commission is kind of left for 5 years before this chapter is updated again. So I was just hoping that it would have a bit more oomph in this chapter in order for for the businesses and the people in the Delta to make sure they're protected, you know, and it
Yeah.
doesn't go into this is a Parks Commission now, and you have to pay a certain amount to the Parks Commission for opening your restaurant or something like that. I could just see it moving in that direction. And I would hope that we would have somebody in high places to help protect us.
Yeah, I think the implementation of this is going to be sufficiently open that we'll, have an opportunity to make sure that we're, addressing that or fostering it or supporting it, whatever the right, whatever the right verb is there relative to this. But, I see the implementation as being the critical next step. The update, the chapter update lays out the rationale for that work. But there's no reason why this cannot and should not be a part of the implementation as we convene those parties, whether it's other agencies or private interests such as yourself or the Delta Chambers, to begin to make progress on some of these items that we've identified.
Good. Well, thanks, Erik. Thanks, Barbara, for good points like always. And I know
thank you.
Or to keep those, certainly before all of us as we consider certainly what's before us this evening. But I think work on the NHA, but also to again be supportive of the various opportunities for tourism and certainly for trade and commerce in the Delta. Okay. Any other comments, Madam Clerk?
I see no hands raised or comments at the moment.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so I'll bring it back to the commission then with our thanks to Ms. Daly for her comments, and certainly any final comments before we entertain a motion by commission members? All right, if not, motion's in order. We have a staff recommendation.
I'll make a motion, we accept.
Okay, Commissioner Steele moves the staff recommendation. You have a second?
I'll second it. It's John Vasquez.
Okay, Commissioner Vasquez seconds it. So we have a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendations outlined. If there's nothing further there, I know we're getting long in the hour here, so I'll call for a roll call vote, please. Stacy.
Chair Nottoli.
Aye.
Vice Chair Nguyen.
Yes.
Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
Commissioner Burgess.
Yes.
Commissioner Vasquez.
Yes.
Commissioner Fuller.
Aye.
Commissioner Steele.
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Nakanishi.
Aye. Yes.
Commissioner Paroli.
Aye.
Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Commissioner Musi.
Aye.
Commissioner Vogel.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair Nottoli. We have 12 ayes, 0 noes, 0 abstains.
Okay, motion approved. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Thank you, commission members and Virginia and the team again. All right, we're getting close to our 6 o'clock hour here, so let's go to item 13, and that's a report of our executive director on the review of the Vision 2030 strategic plan, and with some updates. And I know we have a red line version in our packet. So Erik, I'll turn to you for the verbal presentation.
Yeah, thank you. And this is really just more of an update, and if there is any direction from commission members. But just very briefly, first off, this is what Vision 2030 looks like. It's the commission strategic plan that was adopted in May 2015. In November of 2020, the staff initiated a review of Vision 2030. And subsequent to that, we had a chance to visit with the advisory committee, the DPAC, on this as well on a couple of occasions. Our focus has been on reviewing the meat of the strategic plan, which are the strategic themes, and then the objectives that are a part of that those strategic themes. And those objectives form the basis of our implementation plan and our staff work plan. So really this is kind of the guiding document, not kind of, this is the guiding document that guides the commission's staff efforts. So what we're proposing and what's incorporated in this red line that's in the commission meeting packet is a tightening of the strategic theme objectives. And that means a few things. First off, it means declaring victory in the case of items that we've completed. We have a National Heritage Area designation, and we achieved permanent status for the Delta Levee subvention programs. So you'll see changes reflecting that. Removing redundancies. Invasive weeds was a topic that was mentioned throughout, and we're suggesting that those redundancies should be removed. Removing or recasting items that the commission staff no longer see as strategic. So some of those changes are indicated in the comments. Adding new objectives, such as promoting agriculture that reduces or eliminates subsidence, broadband, and channel dredging in the Delta. So none of those items are currently included in Vision 2030, but we think they rise to a strategic level and should be. And in addition on that list would be collaboration on social science research. So those categories, accomplishments, redundancies, removing or recasting items we no longer see as strategic, and then adding these new objectives are what comprise the red line that's presented in the meeting packet. What I'd ask for at this point is if there are any commission comments on that or any direction, what I would like to do is to review the proposed red line or any adjustments to that with DPAC, and then for us to seek comment from the Delta community before bringing this back for commission consideration, hopefully at the May 20th meeting. But that would be the proposed next steps. And if commission members feel like it's good to go, we'll proceed down that path. If there are any comments that you have for me, I'm all ears and I'm ready to take down your notes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Okay, commission members. Comments, suggestions, thoughts? Any hands raised, Stacy?
No, there are not.
Eric, let me understand. So if you don't get any additional feedback this evening, you would then go forward for public review with what's been outlined in the packet this evening. That's what that would be the point by which you go, take the red lines out and then go forth with that. Is that the intent?
Yeah, that would be the intention. Thinking about it right now, if the next visit was with DPAC, that would not enable us to take it out to the public as well. So I think what I would recommend doing is to take it out to the public, see what kind of comments we get back over the month of April, and then visit with DPAC on that in early May, and then we'll get some DPAC input to it before it could come back to the commission. Alternatively, if we're getting a lot of comment and great interest, and it feels like we need more work to do on this, we could certainly take more time to do that. There's no requirement that we bring this back to the commission at the May meeting, and we could focus in on July in that case. But that would be my intention, although I'm perfectly content to relax the schedule on that if commission members have a particular approach they feel is warranted here.
Okay, that's helpful. And again, it would allow you some opportunity to get some additional input. Are commission members okay with that approach? Obviously, it sounds like there's some flexibility and timing to bring it back, but in the event that there's not any red flags in working with the DPAC, certainly we could come back in May or July, and I guess you work with you, Eric, as you go out. There's obviously a lot work that's gone into this, a lot of thought, and if there's other feedback, then I guess I would just say leave it to you to kind of determine what's the best time frame based upon what you just said. So, Commissioner's okay with that approach then, and if you have other thoughts, again, you reflect on this. Certainly, you can go back to Erik and staff with comments, and if there's any concerns about the time frame, express that through our executive director, and he can communicate to the chair on that, and we can plan accordingly for bringing it back. So, okay. All right. Any comments or thoughts from members of the commission? If not, I'm going to turn to the public if there's any hands up. Stacy?
So far, there are no hands raised.
Okay. Last call then. If not, if you're okay with Erik's report update to move according to what direction he outlined. Take that as a yes unless anybody says no. Okay, Erik, I think that's good product to work with here, and you'll bring it back either in the April or excuse me, the May or the July timeframe. It looks like at this point. All right. Well, that gets us down then to, if there's no other comments on that item, it gets us down to last item of the evening, which is the adjournment. Do you want to announce that the next meeting will be scheduled for May 20th, 2021? It'll likely be a Zoom meeting, and until we get further along in lifting restrictions for gathering, we'll probably be in this format for at least the next 1 or 2 meetings. So anything else for the good of the order? I'll go back to my commission members. Any other comments or announcements before we adjourn?
No, sir. Good meeting. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thanks, Oscar. Okay. Well, thanks to all of you for hanging in there. It was a very good meeting this evening. And if there's nothing else, then we'll stand in adjournment, and we'll come together again May 20th. Thank you all very much, and be safe, and see you soon.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Okay. Bye, Paul.
Hey, thanks so much for letting me in, man. I know it's a little rough around the edges, but okay.
Good. Okay. Very good. Thanks again. Okay.
All right, later.
Bye-bye.